Greetings everyone and welcome back to 365 Days of Prog. I had the wrong script in front of me, so I was about to say a name of a different album, but in fact we are reviewing today The Inner Mounting Flame by Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Hi, my name's Naomi. I'm an avid progressive rock fan, but I'm a long ways from knowing all the prog albums out there. But this year, I'm gonna give it a try. This is 365 Days of Prog.
Now, I don't know how many of my audience can appreciate this, but look at my curls today. Like, honestly, they are amazing. The last few days I've been going with my braids, but I decided to go back to being curly and it looks pretty damn good. But without further ado, here are some of my favorite bits from this album. So it's odd. It seems like lately there's two main things that have been appearing more on my channel. The first one is albums that fall under the jazz rock / fusion category, and the second one is albums that consist and use a violin. And today we are reviewing The Inner Mounting Flame, which is an album that falls under the jazz rock fusion category and also happens to have a violin in it. Now, I might have said this in the past when we'll talk about Later by Nucleus, but I will say it again for this album. This album might be the quintessential jazz rock fusion album out there. Of course, that's if you don't consider the works of Miles Davis as being prog. Now, before I even get into this review, I kind of have to interject my own personal opinion inside of here, because honestly, I don't find this album to be all that much representative of this subgenre specifically. I just find that the jazz part in this entire album kind of falls short and it's more rockier and experimental, but not as traditionally jazzy as one might say. And another thing is, I don't find this album to be all that fantastic and great in order to be called quintessential, but I am repeating what a lot of others have said. But anyway, Mahavishnu Orchestra are a New York-based band. They formed in 1971, and that's the same year in which they released this album. They are led by guitarist John McLaughlin. Now, he himself made this group, which was inspired by rock, by jazz, and some Eastern inspirations as well, and honestly the sound of Mahavishnu Orchestra, at least in my opinion, falls more under the psychedelic jazz. And as I said, this album, although having some of the bare bones that would resemble a jazz album, it does fall kind of far off from most traditional jazz fusion albums, meaning albums like Romantic Warrior, or we'll talk about it later, do not sound anything like this one. Now, I find it specifically that this album starts off pretty confused with a song called Meeting of the Spirits. I didn't like this one all that much. I was expecting something completely different from my past experiences, but honestly this song was not a great opener, and I thought that this album was gonna get a whole lot better, and although getting somewhat better, it didn't really, wow me at any point. If I had to say, I find that this album and this song in particular are mostly filled with what you might call atmospheric textures. The second song, called Dawn, is one that I preferred much more. I found it more to be a traditional jazz song in many ways, and although following a pretty standard formula of having one rhythm and then instrument soloing on top of it and intensifying, I still think that this song was much better than the predecessor of it. Now, the third song is actually my favorite on here. It's called The Noonward Race, and that song is, simply put, showing the virtuosity of all the band members that are in the band. They all play very, very fast and very, very tight, and that's something very interesting to listen to, and it's really quite impressive, and the song as it goes goes is actually kind of good, and I think the main selling point for me liking this song the most has to be the electric violin that's soloing on here. Now the fourth track of A Lotus on Irish Stream is my least favorite track on here. Like, I really didn't like it. It didn't have any place in this album in my opinion. It's not jazzy, it's not anything that I can really say. I don't think it's a great song, and honestly it was really in need of a vital transformation, and luckily the song that comes after it is, well, called Vital Transformation. And that song did bring some new colors into the album, but wasn't overall that impressive to me. And then you have the song The Dance of Maya, which specifically I didn't really like. I don't know, I can't connect to this music all that much, and I don't know why. It's not like anything I've ever heard, but it's definitely not what I was expecting from this album. And then we are capping off this album with two pretty nice songs. The first one is called You Know, You Know. Now, that song in particular, I am absolutely sure that I've heard before, but the thing is, I have no idea where. It has this really catchy riff as its main rhythm, and it's really well known. If any of you know maybe where it has also appeared, and maybe where I could have found it before this, then let me know. But honestly, it's a pretty nice song, but it doesn't have a hook to really get you into it. And then you have the last track of Awakening, also a pretty fine song, not too shabby, and then this album ends. But this is not the point where I end my review, because wait, there's more I have to say. Now, going on the Prog Archives, which is my go-to website when researching about prog albums for these videos, I saw that this album had an overwhelming majority of people saying that it's a 5 out of 5 album, because that's how the ratings on the Prog Archives go. Now, you might not have followed each of the 101 episodes I've done on this series so far, but you should know that there are only 3 albums which I've rated so far as being 10 out of 10 albums. That being said, I find that there's a lot of good albums, a ton of great albums, quite a handful of, close to perfect albums, but honestly, there's a minuscule amount of perfect albums. And specifically why I'm saying this is because when I go on the Prog Archives, I see very high ratings for a lot of albums, and a lot of people just, spewing out their 5-star reviews, and honestly, I don't really get it. I think that my process in which I go through to actually give you this video right now, which includes, listening to the album, writing down a review, then rewriting a script, then thinking about it some more, then doing all sorts of things and recording and editing, all of this leads up to me basically having a very sound conclusion on what I think on each album, and then translating that into numbers. And I find that this process and my willingness to actually, find perfect albums is what makes most of the albums, well, not perfect, because it's really hard being there. And when you don't have this entire process and you only give an album a listen once or maybe twice and then you rate it, you don't really experience the same thing. And then you might say an album, yeah, it's perfect, and then just completely forget about it, and that's not perfection in my opinion. Like, if you forget about an album, it's not perfect. And I'm not saying this because I want to say that a lot of reviewers are just spewing out their 5-star ratings like it's nothing. No, that's not the reason. I just want to let you all know that if you ever feel like I'm giving a low review on an album you specifically love very, very much, I'm saying this because I'm comparing it to basically everything else that I know, not even on this list, just everything else. And I find that if an album is perfect, is one that would never leave me. And in no way, shape or form do I ever see myself giving this album a perfect rating, and honestly I don't even understand how anyone can give it a perfect rating, because there's a lot of flaws in this album, but maybe I'm just blind to them, I don't know. You can tell me down in the comments what you like about this one, cause I'd really love to hear. But yeah, all in all, this is a fine jazz rock fusion album, definitely the weirdest one and not sort of the traditional jazzy one that I was expecting, and it's an album that I wouldn't forget anytime soon, although I didn't really like it all that much. So I don't really have a lot to say about this cover, but I'm pretty impressed by the seamless transition between the flame and the picture in the middle. I think it's kind of interesting for an effect done without Photoshop. But honestly, besides showing the inner mounting flame that the name of the album is, I don't see there's a lot in this one. I'm glad that they didn't just put the image of the band on the cover and that's it. I like the fact that they had to do, something more creative with it, and I think it came out really cool. But it's a simple cover, and I think my review of it should stay, well, Simple. So when it comes to the rating of this album, this one gets a Prog Archives 3 out of 5 stars, or my own opinion, a 6 out of 10. But that's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for tomorrow because we're going to be listening to an album called Fanatic by the band Jadis, the first band to hit 3 listens on this series. But that's about it, guys. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Bye, guys.